So I think this gives us an insight into Islam and, yeah, the practices of Islam and Muslims. Now, this talk that I'm going to give, the whole discussion was based on a talk by Rafe Hadel Manku. That's him over here. He's well known from discussions on the BBC and especially also on the New Culture Forum. He's a really intelligent historian, very smart guy, great speaker. And Rafe is an author, he's a broadcaster, and he's a historian. And he specializes in British institutions like the monarchy and also the Commonwealth realms. He's a well-known commentator in national and international media, from the BBC to ABC. He's a trustee of the Royal Canadian Heritage Trust and a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum think tank. And the topic today is colonialism and empire. And Rafe, being, from India, basically, his family is, descended. He speaks as a child of empire, and he says so in this talk that he gives, which is really fascinating. So let's look at the woke grift and tort law. San Francisco Reparations Committee proposes $5 million to each eligible black person. This is going to cost billions, if not trillions. Yeshua's Yahweh says, yeah. He says, I saw his latest speech. He smashed it. He did. He was brilliant. Yeah. And this is going to cost an untold fortune and bankrupt the economy of California, which is already bankrupt, right? So they want to pay each eligible black person $5 million. So Taif Muslim isn't a good source of knowledge right now. Yeah. So let's see. Always said rather have an owner as a slave in USA than Arabic through Africa as an African for the reason of castration. Yeah, that was horrible. I mean, that was horrifying. I mean, think about it. Where are the black slaves that went to Arabia, right? You had 350,000 slaves go to North America, and now you've got over 30 million. You had something like up to 18 million slaves go to Arabia. Where are they? Where are they? Seriously, if you have the same multiple of growth 100 times, you should have like 1 billion people in Saudi Arabia today who are black. Where are they? Well, they were castrated, they were killed, and yeah, I mean, it's that simple. I've heard of this book. Have you read the book by John Azuma from Ghana in his book, The Legacy of Arab Islam in Africa? No, I've not, but it has been recommended to me, and I drop it in the comments later, please, because it's actually, I should have a look at that. I've heard it's really good. So yeah. Dragon says men all castrated, and yes, that is unfortunate. I mean, yeah. Let's continue. California reparations efforts eyeing $5 million payments in restitution. Efforts in San Francisco and Palm Springs highlights racial inequities. Okay, great and well. So, in recent months, we've seen the issue of slavery and colonialism expand from woke campuses into mainstream. That's the UK and now in America. California now wants to award $5 million to descendants of slaves, bankrupting their economy in the process. From Barbados to Jamaica, prominent Caribbeans are calling for Britain to pay reparations for slavery and the consequences of colonialism. Now, if this were 1807 or 1833, we might consider the merits of the claim because slavery was rife at the time, although it was in its decline, because the victims of slavery would have been alive and would have been deserving of damages. But now we are 200 years later. It's not 1807, it's not 1907, it's not even 2007, as Rafe says in his talk, right? Over 2 centuries have passed since Britain led the world as the very first empire in history to abolish slavery. But you know what? It's not okay to be white. Ask any leftist, right? Ask anyone who votes for BLM, right? You can say it's okay to be black, right? It's okay to be anything but white. So unfortunately, they are shaming people for something that they should be proud of. You can't say, well, hold on, we need to celebrate white culture for having abolished slavery. Not allowed. Okay, so, and Tony says, and funny how almost no one talks about the Afro-Arabs. Yeah, well, let's see. He says in Iraq, Afro-Arabs still suffer much poverty and discrimination, but modern-day moralists do not care. Yes, they are hypocrites. Thank you very, very much. Polski bombowiec, sorry, I was going to say drie in Afrikaans, good grief. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so Kasike says, speaking of slavery in the Caribbean, What about the Irish slaves? Funny that Ireland never says anything what Africans do. Yes, that would be, excuse my French here, but black fragility, because people love talking about white fragility. Hey, maybe we should talk about black fragility. I don't know. So I'm kind of happy to offend everyone if it if it's true. When you bring up the book White Cargo, the BLM Go Quiet, there were more white slaves in Africa. There were more white slaves taken from Europe to Africa than there were slaves taken from Africa to North America. Let's be very honest about that. So yeah. Black Americans were given an option to leave for Africa, Liberia specifically, but they all chose to stay in the USA. Yes, that is true, Ishan. But also, of course, Liberia turned into a mess because, well, yeah. Okay, so Britain, remember, led the world as the first empire in history to abolish slavery. The right of reparations died long ago because, legally speaking, reparations are fundamentally about matters of what is called tort law, T-O-R-T, tort law. Now, it's really just about the money. So the purposes of damages or restoration or reparation is to restore the victim, in this case the slave, to the position they were in before the damage occurred. That is tort law. If you suffered some kind of harm, you get reparations, some kind of damages, financial compensation to refund you so that you have restitution. The problem is you have to be the victim. You can't come 200 years later and say, well, my great, 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 great grandfather, from 221 years ago, well, he was a slave and therefore I need money now. I need $5 million. Unfortunately, there are legal implications here and there are other practical considerations. Right. Now, we'll discuss a little bit of that. Now, only the victim, under the law, under tort law, only the victim can receive damages, not their descendants. So it's possible that if you die right now, and then your family might be able to get compensation, but not 200 and something years later. So your descendants are not eligible for this. Okay, that's the law of the land. So they will literally be violating the Constitution and the law of the land because they want a little bit of money, because they're greedy. Now, I can legitimately claim, coming from South Africa, that my forebears came there as slaves, right? So, I mean, where do I put in my claim for my $5 million? So 6 or 7 generations separate those alive today from their British Empire slave ancestors. So 19th century slaves suffered genuine indignity. But how does one conclude that their great, 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 great grandchildren are also victims and deserving of reparations? Those great grandchildren are not victims. They're living in the best countries in the world. They're not victims. They are simply ingrates. They are ungrateful for the benefits that accrue to them by living in really good countries like Britain and America. So on the contrary, from Britain to the Caribbean, the descendants of slaves today have a far better and higher quality of life than they would have had their ancestors remained in Africa.